Hello, my name is B. Yvette Myers, and today we're talking about empowering our children from lot for life and from bullies. Thank you for joining me. Okay, so let's begin with a disclaimer. This is absolutely positively necessary due to the climate that we have today. This information in this workshop is not the law. I am not saying that this is an absolute. This is this workshop was designed as a tool to encourage further research or to provoke further thought on how our behavior prepares our children to either be victors or victims. I would likely challenge your thought process on bullying and children. If I do, and it is information that you can use, please do so. However, if it is something that you find offensive, could you remove your feelings and then reevaluate the content? If it is still offensive and unusable for you, then don't use it. It's just that simple. If you feel someone could benefit from this workshop, please pass it on. Lastly, this workshop is not geared to diagnose or to treat, but for informational purposes only. Thank you for joining me. And again, let's get started. Now we ask, how do we empower our children? We empower our children by allowing them to make age appropriate decisions. We empower our children by affording them the option or the opportunity to mess up and to fix their mess up. We empower them by setting boundaries and holding them accountable when they cross boundaries, when they cross lines. We empower them by being consistent. And we empower them by understanding that children don't need adult friends, they need guidance. Allowing them to make age appropriate decisions. This is one of the areas that I find um, that I have to repeat when it comes to clients, or should I say, not repeat. There are a lot of clients that come in with this same issue. We are affording children that are babies in the mind. We are affording them, or we are providing them, or encouraging them. We're requiring of them to make decisions that a child that age should not be afforded to make, should not be allowed to make. For instance, having a 6-year-old to watch an infant. I need to run to the mailbox. I need to run outside. I need to go cut the yard. Allowing a 8-year-old to watch a 2-year-old. An 8-year-old doesn't have the capacity to watch a 2-year-old. I need to run to the store. I need to do this. I need to take a nap. Asking an 8-year-old to watch a 2-year-old whose mental capacity is about 2 minutes, or should I say their attention span is about 2 minutes, and an 8-year-old whose attention span is about 8 minutes, you're going to lay down and take a nap. Or some parents lay down and take a nap and ask the 8-year-old to watch the 2-year-old. What if the 8-year-old gets sleepy? This is something that we're giving a child, and if you look at the context of this example, we're giving an 8-year-old too much responsibility. Now that 8-year-old becomes a 9-year-old, becomes a 10-year-old, becomes 11, 12, 13. Now you have a 14-year-old that is used to having too much responsibility, and they don't know how to be a 14-year-old. Now we tell the 14-year-old to stay in a child's place. We tell the 14-year-old to do children stuff. Well, where all their lives they have been required to do things that they should not have been allowed to do. This puts me in a context of a post that I remember reading a couple of days ago, and it talked about adults. I'm sorry, being children having the responsibility to care for your younger siblings. That as I was reading that post, there were a lot of posts, a lot of feedback where it was talking about Adults now that had resentment for their younger siblings or that had resentment for their parents when they were required to raise their children, raise their siblings. We are not empowering them. We are not giving them or teaching them responsibility by requiring that they do something that they are not equipped mentally to do. We are setting them up for failure because many times they're going to do something wrong in that situation more than they do something right. And if they do something wrong, encourage and continuously reminding them that that wasn't wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. Continuously reminding them of that, then that only discourages them that that's something that they can't do, or I'll never be able to do that, or I'll always mess up when I do that. We empower them by affording them the option, the opportunity to mess up and then fix it. Now, this first example is of giving a child a responsibility to watch a child while you're sitting there is fine. What do you think? I'm asking questions. What do you think the baby needs? What do you think they should be doing? Now, if you have some 8, 9 year olds that want to watch their siblings, for that I say, I encourage them to. I encourage you but while you are there, while you are up, while you are attentive, because jealousy does set in. Jealousy is a real thing. Affording them the opportunity to mess up. We have until children are 16, 17, 18 years old before they move to the next phase of their lives, where we can be some type of influence to their mess ups. Trust me, as an adult, as a woman with 3 grown children, once they get past 18, 19 years old, your influence is minimal, or should I say it begins to dwindle. Afford them the opportunity to mess up and then show them how to correct that mess up by asking thoughtful, insightful questions. What do you think we should do next? I love that question. What were you thinking when you made that decision? I love that question. How do you think we can fix this? These are questions that we can ask to encourage them to move to outside of their mess up, because anybody can screw something up. Now, encouraging that same child to think of ways to fix that screw up, it empowers them to fix their own problems versus sitting and waiting for someone to come and to fix their problems, which usually happens with parents. Fathers usually fix their daughter's problems, and moms usually fix their son's problems. And then when you have an adult that is sitting waiting on their mother or their father to come fix their problem, at that point we get tired. Or some parents encourage this behavior all the way up until they end up leaving this world. And then you have a child that's dysfunctional. Setting boundaries. This is one of my favorite. Boundaries are things that your children, even if we raise our children with no boundaries, once they exit our little world, once they go out into the real world, once they go out and start to associate with others, there will be boundaries. There will be things that they cannot do. If they have access to everything in your home, including your room, some parents, that's the taboo. But if they have access to everything, their sisters' things, their brothers' things, everybody's things, boundaries have to be set, because the moment they go to school and cross those boundaries, you're going to have a boundary checker on the other side that's either going to usher them back over on the other side of that boundary or will knock them back on the other side of that boundary. There are boundaries. People don't like to be touched. Some people don't. We have to establish those boundaries with our children. Some people don't like to be talked to negatively. Now, in the Miami, Florida, where I grew up, if you spoke a certain way, then that just indicated that you could fight. Now, if you spoke a certain way, and you couldn't fight, you usually carried a butt whooping. Now, I said that to say within boundaries, if you set limits on your children, on our children, then there are certain things you just don't say to people. Now, if you say those things, then there are things that could happen to you. Is it right? Probably not. Is it wrong? Probably so. But there are still things that could happen to you. Being consistent. This is one of the issues that I have, one of the greatest issues that I have with parents is being consistent. Everybody wants to be the friend. Everybody wants to not be the hard person. We have to understand and get in our minds that being a friend to our child is not likely possible until they become adults. Because there are things that a friend will close their eyes or turn their head to that a parent will not and cannot. So, being consistent requires being parenting. Being consistent requires parenting. Being a friend, you can turn your head as an adult and allow them to walk into their own decisions and the backlash of that decision. But as a parent, it's difficult to do that. They don't need friends. Or should I say, you can play with your child. You can have tea time. You can play basketball. You can, all those fun parent child activities. But to say that you are your child's friend, I put a big question mark over that. Can you effectively parent and be a friend? Maybe that's a question for you guys. Y'all give me some feedback on that. Can you effectively parent and be a friend? I mean, the truest form of a friend. Now, give me some feedback on that. So here's another one of my favorite sayings. We empower our children by teaching them how the world works. We take how the world works and then we change it, we condense it, we put it in child's forms, and then we mimic that in our homes. Now, it's a lot of things in the world that we are not going to teach our children, of course. There are a lot of behaviors that we're not going to teach our children, of course. But I'm speaking specifically of the context or how things function. I used to tell my kids is to give you an insight on when I was raising my children. As I've said earlier, my my youngest child is 25 years old, my daughter, and my oldest is 31. So we empower our children. And one of the things that I used to tell my kids is trust benefits you, not me. If I can trust you, that means that you can go where you want to go. You can stay out. You can go many places without supervision. That's because I believe that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and you're not going to do what would bring shame to yourself or to our family. Trust benefits them. I used to say that all the time to the point where sometimes they would say, I know, Mom, trust benefits me, not you. Yes, it does. Now, if you take that concept and you take it into the world, trust is the same thing that operates when it comes to credit. Credit is just saying that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And the higher your credit score is saying, in the context of things, is that you are more trustworthy than someone with a lower credit score in the context of things. There are exceptions, but I'm not speaking of those exceptions. So that's one concept that I took that with my kids, and that can be transferred into the world. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to say this, but I'm going to expound on it later on. We teach principles, not specifics. If you try to teach specifics, you will lose yourself trying to cover every specific idea, thought, or situation. You cannot possibly teach a child how to respond in every situation, but you can teach a principle. There are only few principles, or even if there's 100, there's still only 100 principles versus a quadrillion, if that's a number of different situations, because one thing can alter a situation and make it an entirely different situation. So the principle of trust is something that I taught my kids, that it benefits them, not me. The message is that I told my children when they were growing up, if I can trust you, then I don't have to worry about you. If I can trust you, I can believe in myself that you can't be influenced to do something that will bring shame to our family or to yourself. If I can trust you, then being concerned or staying up worrying is not something that I have to be concerned or I have to tax myself with, because I can trust you. And if by chance you do get into something, I can believe, or I can have certainty that it was something that was unavoidable. And because it was unavoidable, it was something that you did not make a bad decision. And then now it's unavoidable. It was unavoidable, as i.e., you driving down the street, you were not drinking, you were not texting and driving, and someone T-boned you. That was unavoidable. Trust benefits them, not us. That's how we empower our children. Now let's talk about some issues that go along with trust. Possible problems. Parents not trusting their children because the children, air quotes, are making bad decisions. They're making bad decisions. So the parent doesn't trust them, which causes them to make more bad decisions because they're trying to prove that they can be trusted. So the anxiety and the stress of trying to prove something right ends up proving it wrong. So now we're in a conundrum. This happens when parents are allowed when this happens usually or sometimes when parents allow children to make decisions above their pay grade. Now the military taught me about pay grade. There were certain things that you could not hear because of your pay grade. At one time I was an E3 in the military, and when the commanders came in, or other commanders from different units came in and they had a meeting, my sergeant or my first sergeant or my company commander, I worked directly with those guys. They would excuse me because what they were talking about was above my pay grade. A lot of times it was just them being men or just talking about everyday things. However, that was still above my pay grade. We allow our kids to hear and listen to any and everything, and with the guise of we're preparing them for the real world. I remember growing up in a time where we could not go to the movies if it was not PG alone. I remember a time when adults would not buy us alcohol. Now, there were a few. I remember a time when parents would not curse in front of their kids because they wanted to preserve their innocence. Somewhere we stopped preserving our children's innocence. and we allowed ourselves to do any and everything in front of them, to say any and everything in front of them. And then when the child has been exposed to so much, we say to that child, stay in the child's place. Where I ask now, what is a child's place? Children aren't allowed to mess up. Now, just as we embrace a attaboy, a good child, or I hate the term good and bad children, but for the sake of this conversation, just as we embrace children that are make good decisions or positive decisions, we frown upon children that don't. And because we frown upon them, that puts that child in a state of anxiety. That child where and some children get to the point where they don't even care anymore because they've been ridiculed and beat down so often that and nobody trusts them with anything, and some are very warranted that they shouldn't be trusted because of their own behaviors. But we don't allow them to mess up. Going back to the questions that I presented earlier, even when they mess up, even with a child that let's call a problematic child, continuously messing up or continuously making negative decisions, how do we get that child to make better decisions? By encouraging that child to figure out a way to fix their own mess up. How do you think we should fix this? How do you think we can get past this? What do you think I can do so that I can trust you again? Make that child work for their own trust. Children do get distracted. And now I gave an age limit on what they can do. I mean, a time limit about their attention span earlier. A 1 year old has an attention span of about 1 minute. I'm hoping that you could infer from that from the other example that I gave. 8 year old about 8 minutes. Now, now keep that in mind when you ask a child to go do something. If you say, go get me a glass of water, bring me a pencil, um, get your sister a bottle, and put your shoes on, likely your child is going to miss something. So for when it comes to age appropriate, I like to go with that whatever the age is, half of those things. So an 8 year old, no more than 4 tasks at a time. And then all depending on the child, no more than two. 5 year old, no more than two or three. 4 year old, no more than two. You get the point. So you get them to trust. And then once they start following through, the more things that they can do successfully and they can see that they can do it right, the more things that they want to do successfully. A child that continuously make bad decisions, a child that's continuously um, doing things what we would consider wrong, is likely a child that has been told that they keep messing up. A child that is reminded of when they mess up, a child that isn't given an opportunity to mess right, to make them to make the right decisions or to do something positive. Encourage them to, when they make a mess, to fix their own mess. But another issue is the need to feel needed. I talked about this earlier. I spoke of this earlier. Parents needing to feel needed, needing children to come to them, needing their everybody to come bring everything through them. That usually happens for a while, and then the parents start to feel like they've been taken advantage of, like nobody takes care of them, or nobody looks out for them, or they do everything and nobody's appreciating them. Everybody is their own world. Everybody is their own island, their own entity. And you come together at dinner time, you come together at arranged meetings to present as a family, but everybody is living on their own island. And we have to develop children that can function alone by themselves, because sometimes they will have friends and sometimes they won't. Sometimes everybody will love them and sometimes they won't. That's a principle that we can teach. In the real world, everybody's not going to like you. And my desire to feel needed, for my child to come to me to feel needed, is so low on the totem pole that it should not even be considered when getting a child to be functional or getting a child to do for themselves. It's almost like a 1 year old and you're tying their shoe. And then a 1 year old, because 1 year olds usually can't tie their shoes. And then a 5 year old, you're still tying their shoe. Some 5 year olds needs help. And then you have, now let's imagine have a 10 year old that needs help tying their shoe. Now it's not so much of you tying their shoe and you having a problem with tying their shoe. What if their shoe comes untied when they're at school? Or what if you're in public and your friends are around? The social pressure of, are you tying that 10-year-old shoe? Now you have to, or feel a need to, or feel pressure to explain why you're still tying a 10-year-old shoe. That's how our need to feel needed can interfere with the development of our children, which prevents them from being positive, which prevents them from empowering them, because now they have to go to somebody else to get something done. And because they have to go to someone else, now you open them up to be taken advantage of. Now that's going to be a problem in the future. Okay, so how do we do this? Here are a few steps that I've come up with. This is not all. This workshop is just to empower you, to encourage you to think past this workshop. We educate them to and give them clear expectations and requirements. I expect you to behave the way that you behave when you are with me or I'm looking at you. I expect you to go out into the world and not to infringe on anybody's rights, not to be always be kind. You don't have to be nice all the time. That's what I teach my grandkids. I did not teach my kids that, but I teach my grandkids that. There's a difference in being kind and being nice. Nice, I've spoken about this in other workshops. Nice, you allow people to walk over you because it's not nice to say no. It's not nice to stand up for yourself. It's not nice to hit someone back. But being kind, you stick up for yourself and you stick up for people that are around you. You don't insert yourself in situations, but you do stick up. That's the difference. When the line is blurred, every issue has to be discussed and every issue has to be told yes or no. Allow them to make decisions based on the education that you've provided, not on what you feel they should know. Again, wait a minute, lovely. That's my granddaughter, y'all. Allow them to make decisions based on the education that you've provided, on things that you know that they know, not on what you think they should know. I've heard parents to tell a 14-year-old, well, you should know better. Well, how should they know better? Have you ever told them on a principle that covers that situation? If you have not, then how should they know? Now they're going into the world and they're making decisions based off their own intellect. And likely it's going to be a negative decision. Now, I had one example, and I'm going to show you, and you can take a look at this. One example is if telling a child that they should not, or no social media. Let's say that a child gets in trouble, makes a negative decision, and your punishment or your discipline is no social media, which your child can interpret as no Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, because those are the main ones, versus all of these that's listed on there. All of those are way to communicate with someone else. Now, if you say no social media, the likely, many of us will think social Instagrams, Facebook, Twitter, and a few others. I can't think of any off the top of off the top of my head. But all of these that are listed on this page are social media. So keep that in mind. Principle, not specifics. Now let's talk about defiance. Defiance is that thing that will come up at some point when parents say one specific thing and a child does exactly the opposite. That's defiance. telling your child to turn off their cell phone or not to talk, not to text. And then they going through other communications, other modes of communication to speak with their, that's my granddaughter again. So, how do you get past defiance? By teaching principle, not specifics. The principle of no communicating or not talking to a specific person because of negative influence or for whatever reason is no communication, not don't text. Because texting, I don't want you texting XYZ is a specific. I don't want you communicating with XYZ is a principle. Now, to make that statement and to expect it to be adhered to is kind of iffy because once a child, especially once they find out or realize or think that they're in love, I try to find a way to communicate along with that paradigm versus against it because it's difficult to go against that. That's one of the entities or the biggest things that I've not been successful at at counseling parents against or at going against myself with my children. And once they think that they are in love or they think that someone else has their best interest at heart more than the parent does, there is nothing you can do, almost nothing you can do to fight against that. I encourage parents to continue to preach, to have expectations, to continue to teach principles, and and just try to wade it through, water it through, get the biggest boat you can, and try to wade through it. Now, here is one possible solution. This is a quote that I've come up with. A lack of trust in a child's decision to make responsible choices. Trust can occur with empowerment. Empowerment happens with education. If education has not taken place, then trust will never likely take place. If education has not taken place, then trust will never likely take place. We have to we empower our kids by educating them on principle, expectations, things that if we try to tell them every specific thing that we don't want them to do, we will lose our heads trying to think of everything. And they will say, well, you didn't say don't go outside. You said don't, you know, go outside at 12. What about at 1? Those are specifics. Teach principles. So principles can be carried from one situation to the next, and it can never, ever, the line can never be blurred with a principle, but it can with a situation. That's how we empower them. We empower them by trust. We trust them by giving them things that they are appropriate. I encourage you to look up age appropriate cognitive development. I think it's some with somewhere with those group of words. Cognitive expectations development for children. It gives you specifics on what children a specific age, excuse me, is supposed to what should be doing, what children at a specific age cognitively can get done. Now, what that does is that opens the door for expectations. To expect a 2-year old to drive a Maserati, to expect a 16-year old to drive a Maserati is insane. Even if they can drive, that's a very fast car. Why would you do that? We've spoken about empowering. Now, let's talk about empowering against bullies. Many children that are being bullied at school are being bullied at home also. Now, this is one of those statements that I made at the beginning in the disclaimer. If you find that this is offensive or if you find that this does not apply to you, skip right past it. I won't be offended. If you find that you can't use anything in this part of in the workshop, then I understand. I completely understand, and I'm not offended. Now, many times children are bullied at home. We bully our children at home with the guise or with the intent of getting them prepared for life or getting them prepared for the rest of the world. To shame a child on Facebook and then go to, because a child did something wrong, and then, or negative, and then if the child goes, get into a relationship and then their spouse or significant other shames them also publicly. We are outraged if someone else did our child like that. But we are teaching them that in order for them to learn, they have to be publicly shamed. Listen to that concept. In order for you to learn a lesson, you have to be publicly shamed. I'm not saying it's good or bad or negative or positive. I'm saying that likely you're going to have more negative results than positives with public shaming. How else do you empower your children against bullies? Allow them to make input into their own lives. If they can make the decision and it affects them, then allow them to make the decision. I used to encourage my kids to make or to pick out dinner. We used to sit down and do a menu for the week. I would allow each of them to make their own decision, make a plan for today. Now, in planning for that meal, they had to have a criteria of expectations. The expectations was to have a balanced meal. Now, once you get a balanced meal, even if you decided pizza, okay, what are we going to go with that pizza? There's not like French fries to go with pizza sounds good, but you got a fat and a carbohydrate, which is a fat pill. So what else could we go with that pizza? Probably a salad. Do you really want to eat salad with pizza? No, but then pizza alone is not a balanced meal. And our goal was a balanced meal. Goals, principles. That's what we teach. What is the goal? What is the outcome that we desire? And what is the principle? If they are treated badly at home, overlooked, ignored, you're setting them up to go out in public for anyone to pay attention to them or others to treat them badly. What usually happens is we do things under the guise of um, the reason that I disciplined you, the reason that I publicly shamed you is because of what you did. Okay, that's the case. So when they go out in public and someone does the same thing, they publicly shames them, or they beat, or they get in a physical altercation. Now we have issues with that. But we've trained them to accept that behavior. We've trained them we put them into the victim role versus the victor role. We put them in a victim role by telling them that this is how you're supposed to be treated. Not always, but many times. And then when they go in public and someone treats them the same way that in their mind they've been treated, then and then many times it's not what is actually happening, it's how the child interprets what's happening. So it's also good to ask your child, why do you think you're being disciplined? Tell me what you think about this discipline. And it's not to say that we're trying to get the child to discipline themselves, or that's actually what we are trying. That's the ultimate goal, is to get them to govern their own behavior. However, what I'm trying to say is to get them to see see what you're seeing and how you feel this is going to be corrected. Everything does not deserve a strap. If it did, all of us that grew up with a strap would be model citizens, and we aren't because it breeds resentment. We teach principles and goals. We empower our children by teaching principles and goals. What are we trying to figure out? What are we trying to get to? What is the principle of this issue? We cannot possibly teach specifics. What are scientists saying? There's empirical evidence that supports that people that are abused, assaulted, or sexually assaulted in their childhood are more likely to experience it again, those same behaviors as adults and throughout their lives. So, the behavior that we are preparing, that we demonstrate, that we give to our kids with the guys that we love them, and this is why I treat you this way, is the same behavior that they're likely to accept as they grow up, as they get older. Keep that in mind. Okay, let's talk about how behavior is carved in our children's brains. Um, I won't go into the specifics or into detail, but I encourage you to look it up how memory is formed. When something happens to our children, that be however they whatever they did to escape or to get out of that situation becomes the go-to behavior. Even if mimicking that behavior in the future causes them anxiety, grief, stress, they continue to do that same behavior until they learn another behavior. So whenever there are anxiety, stress, depression is continued at the home, whenever these behaviors are replicated or consistent in the home, anxiety is the main one, then that whatever that child did to alleviate that anxiety becomes the go-to behavior. So we're teaching them how to behave in the future. So even like I said, even if cowering down, if a parent is domineering, if a parent is, you know, forward and domineering, if a parent is domineering, the survival method becomes for that child is to cower, to submit, to do whatever needs to be done to just make that domineering whatever it is go away. So now take that behavior and transfer it into the school. A child sees another student that's domineering, and the go-to behavior is then to cower, which now puts a target on that child's back. We teach our children how to behave like this. It's not that I'm encouraging parents to allow children to be disrespectful or to be however you interpret disrespect or to be, to not have to just accept everything. There should be a healthy level of questioning in every home as to why are we doing this or something and there are some times when I can hear the spirits of my ancestors going, don't question me, and I remember that. Don't question. You don't, if an adult says something, you just do it. Now, what happens when times have changed? Behaviors have changed. Everything has changed. And now you have a child that has a question and a parent saying, don't question me. What do they do now? I remember growing up having a ton of questions. And I remember being told, just fake it till you can make it. However, that never sat right with me. I could never fake it well enough to make it. So I ended up failing all the way around until I decided not to do it at all. There should be, I'm going to restate that, a healthy level of questioning. When we don't allow questions to come about, even if there's a specific time for healthy questioning. Let's talk about what we did this past week. Let's talk about whatever questions you may have. What were you thinking? How do you think we can make a better week? How do you think we can be more productive this upcoming week? At that point, even if that point there's, allowed for questioning, there should always be a level of so that the child can understand on their level. When they don't understand, they begin to mimic whatever behavior they're expected to mimic. And whatever causes them the least amount of anxiety, they will replicate that, even if it causes them grief in the future. It takes a while to retrain the brain. It takes time, it takes consistency to retrain the brain to abandon old behaviors and to adopt new ones. So, whatever has been going on in the past, whatever has been happening in the past, take this time now to retrain your children brain to accept other things or to acknowledge other behaviors or a more productive behavior, more positive behavior. Retrain them, retrain their brain to think that up to abandon that past behavior. Empowering our children is educating them, is teaching children principles. You cannot cover every everyday situation to a child, but you can cover principles. Now, one principle is telling your child to hit back when you are hitting them, degrading them or ridiculing them. How do you tell them to hit back if they are hit, but not to hit you back? Now, Like I said, the spirit of my ancestors, I hear them because I said so. Now, that may be true, but you're teaching them how to become a victim. You're teaching them that certain people have certain rights to treat them a certain way, and they have no say so about it. You're teaching them that. If the goal is to discipline, our ultimate goal is to discipline our kids, is to get them where they're functioning as an island, to get them where they can govern their own selves. That's the ultimate goal. So if beating them, or as you may have not picked it up, but I'm a firm advocate against corporal punishment. That's my personal belief. So you will probably hear it spewed throughout this assessment, throughout this workshop. I don't think it works, because if it did, we would all be saints in my generation, and we're not. What it does is it deter you from allowing that source to find out about your mischief. So if I do something and my mama tell me out the frame, and when she finds out, now the next time I do something, it does not stop me from doing that thing. It teaches me to, if I want to do that thing again, which I've did every single time, now I got to do it in a better way so that she doesn't find out. It did not teach me to govern my own behavior. And that's what we want our children to learn, to govern themselves. You can have a 5-year-old that governs themselves. You can have a 10-year-old that go. This will I cannot that will say I can't do this because my mom would be disappointed in me. I've heard it. My parents would be disappointed in me. This was embarrassing to my family. I can't do this. That's what we want, not I can't do this because I'm gonna get in trouble. What happens when the trouble goes away? Well, can you do that? No, it's unacceptable. If there is value in our children, it should be value across the board. Value in how we treat them, how we discipline them, how we correct them, how we encourage them. It should be value all across the board, not those pockets of this child gets on my nerves, which they will, but our behavior cannot say that. Our behavior cannot say that we are tired of our children. When it does, it begins to show we begin to show it to them, and no matter what our words say, they can feel it. That's that energy that I spoke about in other workshops that you can feel when you walk in a room, like someone has been talking about you, or that someone that doesn't like you. You cannot hide that. No one can hide that, and because you can't hide that, your children feel it also. So this is my theory. We allow people to do things to us unchecked if they are positioned high enough on our own personal ladder of important people. Now, each one of us have a scope or a ladder. I call it a ladder. Each one of us has a rhetorical ladder, a verbal ladder. And people that are higher on this ladder have more of an impact, a direct impact in our lives. People that are lower on the ladder have a lower impact. For instance, um politicians. If you are not a person that follow politics, a politician may be at the bottom of your ladder because they do not have a direct impact on your personal life. We're not talking about your global life. We're talking about your personal life, on your how you move every day. They don't have a direct impact, or you can't see the direct impact of that they have on your personal life. Your parents, if you're 10 years old, may have may sit at the top of that ladder. Now, what happens is when you have children that are that can be influenced easily, what happens is the parents drop off the top of that ladder, because they stop being they stop being a someone that the children look up to, but someone that the children can hide things from. So they drop on that ladder, and then their friends become gets accept a higher rung on that ladder. So now what the friend says, what the teacher says, is more important than what the parent says. So how do we move people up on someone else's ladder? We can't. You can't. You can't change anybody else on someone else's ladder. They have to put you where they want you to be. Just like I wrote an article on that on my LinkedIn page. Um, fighting for a different position in someone else's head. You cannot move someone else on someone else's ladder. You can't. You can't move your position on someone else's ladder. There are expectations that everybody has of everybody. We have expectations of what our parents should behave like. We have expectations of our children. We have expectation of our significant others. We have expectations. And when they move outside of those expectations, we become disappointed. Some say we should expect nothing from anyone. I disagree with that. I think that we should have expectations because we just expect politicians not to do certain things. We expect, and that's a hot topic, so I'll just skip right past it. But we expect clergymen not to do certain things. That's a hot topic also, so I'll skip right past it. But we do have expectations. Now, understanding your position, how important you are to your child, can help you to understand why or how to try to get yourself to move. When you ask your child, how many people ask their children, what do you expect from me? What do you think I should be doing for you? Because sometimes children just expect, oh, my parents will do it. Oh, my parents will do it. My mom will do it. My dad will do it. And then when you don't do it, you drop on that ladder. Disappointment, personal disappointment. And sometimes you can drop and not even know you're dropping. But asking family meetings, especially with younger kids, what do you expect from me? This is what I expect from you. This is what I expect you to be kind every single day. Being kind is being assertive, not taking advantage of others and not allowing others to take advantage of you. When we teach placement based on deeds versus behavior, that's when people start to fall. When we teach placement on that ladder based on behavior or behavior versus deeds, which one is greatest importance to you? Which one have you taught your children to hold a value? What you do or how you act? What you do or what you say? How you act or what you say? However you want to change those words around. Which one is more important to you? When we find out which one is most important to us, that's when, or to your child, that's when you can see how they place people on their ladder. But we keep in mind, if I go back to my first point, we allow people to do things to us unchecked if they are positioned high enough on our personal ladder of important people. We allow it. So if your child is being bullied, how is that person on, even if they're afraid of that person, even if they're terrified of that person because that person is bigger, stronger, faster, whatever, even if then physical strength is more important to your child than verbal strength. I teach my grandchildren the strongest thing about you is your words, because someone will always be able to overpower you physically. So the strongest thing about you are your words. If one person won't listen, tell someone else, keep talking until someone listens to you. So if the strength in her, my granddaughter is the oldest, the strength in her is her words, then it does not matter who's bigger or stronger or faster than her. Now we're moving closer and closer towards that goal, but that's the ultimate goal. Sigmund Freud said that our personalities are determined when we are children and reproduce throughout our lives. We learn what to accept as children. We learn what to accept in our homes. And whatever we learn to accept, whatever we see as acceptance, even if the child isn't being physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally abused, if the child is witnessing their spouse, their parent, one parent being physically abused, if the child is witnessing those, the child takes the principle of that abuse. This is someone that's bigger than that person that's being abused, that's talking to them, and then they take that principle and they move it towards outside of the home. If the person becomes that abuser, that's someone that's bigger, stronger, faster, now they allow that abuse. I said allow that abuse because the moment we start talking, people start listening. As hot topic as bullying is today, the moment someone says anything about bullying, people are listening. If they aren't listening, and if you are a child that's listening to this, then keep telling someone until someone listens. The strongest thing about you are your words, not your fists, your words. If they won't listen, then write a letter to the school board, write a letter to someone, write a letter to the president, write a letter to someone. Well, I don't know about that part, that last part, but write a letter to your aunt, to your uncles, your cousins. Just write a letter to someone and tell them what's going on. Get your words out. Tell somebody about what's going on. And then keep telling someone until it stops, because your strength is in your words. Keep in mind, I'm going to end this with this last thing. Many bullies are scared themselves. This is not an attempt to justify bullying, but many are. And many bullies have been bullied. Many bullies are being beaten and tortured, or not tortured, but beaten and mistreated at home. This is not to say that it's okay, but it is to say that if you are a bully and you are bullying and someone is mistreating you, then you can talk to, you can tell to. This is not just for those that are being bullied. If you are being bullied and you are a bully, you can still tell. You can still talk. You can still tell someone. If I were to end with anything, it is we create environments, and those environments are reproduced throughout our lives. Everything that we're doing right now is in some type of way is a reproduction in some degree of what we grew up in or what we've learned throughout our lives. And we keep reproducing that same environment on and on and on. I encourage you that if you want to something new, you have to learn something new. It is never too late. Empowering our children is creating an environment that we want them to reproduce when they are adults. We want them to be functional adults. I thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope that there was something that was said that was encouraging. If at anything that was said that you find offensive, I encourage you to go back and listen again. If you still find it offensive, then just scratch it away, disregard it. You don't have to take it with you. But if you can pass it on to someone else, I encourage you to do that also. Thank you again. This is Yvette Myers from Columbia, South Carolina. Have a good day. Thank you for spending this time with me. Again, my name is B. Yvette Myers. My phone number is here. My fax number is here, as well as my website. I have a lot of information on my website, as well as previous workshops. I have a newsletter that goes out once a month. I encourage you to take advantage of the free information, as well as order the newsletter. It's got a lot of good information on there. Thank you again for your time, and have a good day.